some people just shouldn't be allowed to fly first class. It lowers the tone for everyone else. That's the thought that sealed Tiffany's fate, a single venomous thread in the tapestry of a day that would unravel her entire life. She saw a black woman with a baby fussing with a designer diaper bag and saw an inconvenience, a blemish on the pristine canvas of her cabin. What she couldn't see was that the woman's husband didn't just pay for the ticket. He owned the entire airline, the plane she stood on, and in a few short hours her future. This isn't just a story about a slap. It's a story about the thunderous, life-altering clap back that followed. The polished floors of the exclusive terminal at JFK reflected the cool, collected demeanor of Chloe Sterling. To the casual observer, she was just another well-dressed woman navigating the controlled chaos of air travel. Her son, 10-month-old Noah, was nestled against her chest in a top-of-the-line baby carrier, his soft breaths a gentle rhythm against her heart. Her movements were economical and graceful, betraying a quiet confidence. She wasn't flustered by the beeping scanners or the curt instructions from security personnel. She was an oasis of calm. Chloe was flying from New York to Los Angeles on Sovereign Airlines, a premier carrier known for its luxurious first-class service. It was a trip she'd made a dozen times, but this was her first time doing it alone with Noah. Her husband Jackson was already on the West Coast, finalizing a multi-billion-dollar acquisition that had kept him occupied for the past week. They were supposed to fly out together, but business, as it often did, had interfered. He had been apologetic, his deep voice laced with genuine regret over the phone. "I'm sorry, my love. The final papers need my signature in person by tomorrow morning. I'll have the jet ready for you and Noah first thing." Chloe had smiled into the phone. "Don't be silly, Jax. We'll be fine on a commercial flight. It's good for Noah to see how the other 99% live," she had teased. "Besides, I don't want to spoil him with a private jet before his first birthday." It was their little inside joke. The truth was, Jackson Sterling didn't just have a jet. He owned the entire fleet. As the majority shareholder and reclusive chairman of Sterling Aviation Group, the parent company of Sovereign Airlines, Jackson's influence was as vast as it was invisible. He preferred it that way. He was a titan of industry who shunned the spotlight, his name known in the boardrooms of global finance, but almost unheard of by the general public. He and Chloe lived a life of immense privilege, but they were fiercely protective of their privacy and determined to raise their son with a sense of humility and perspective. Flying commercial was a small but significant part of that effort. As Chloe settled into seat 2A, a spacious pod with its own privacy screen and a lay-flat bed, she began the familiar ritual of nesting. She wiped down the surfaces with an antibacterial wipe, arranged Noah's toys on the vacant seat beside her, and placed the chic but practical diaper bag at her feet. Noah, sensing the change in environment, began to stir, his little brow furrowing. "Shh, my sweet boy," Chloe murmured, gently rocking him. "It's okay. We're just going on a little adventure." It was at that moment that Tiffany Brewster, senior flight attendant, made her first pass through the first-class cabin. Tiffany carried herself with an air of proprietary authority. She wasn't just staff. In her mind, she was the curator of this exclusive space. With her blonde hair pulled into a severe chignon and her uniform pressed to a razor's edge, she radiated a frosty competence. For 15 years, she had worked this route, serving celebrities, CEOs, and old-money aristocrats. She prided herself on her ability to anticipate their needs to be discreet and to maintain the rarefied air of luxury. Her eyes, the color of a winter sky, swept across the cabin and snagged on Chloe and Noah. Her perfectly painted lips thinned into a line of disapproval. She saw Chloe's rich, dark skin, her intricate braids, and the baby strapped to her chest, and an ugly, preconceived narrative began to write itself in her mind. Another one, she thought, the words dripping with a sour internal disdain. Probably some musician's girlfriend, or a reality TV star flashing a new money credit card. They think a big ticket buys them class. She glided past without a word, a silent judgment hanging in the air. Her focus shifted to a man in seat 3D, a familiar face, a tech CEO she'd served before. "Mr. Peterson, welcome back. Can I get you a glass of champagne before we take off?" She asked, her voice a warm, syrupy confection. Chloe noticed the shift in tone, but thought little of it. She was used to being underestimated, to being judged on sight. It was a wearying but familiar tax on her existence. She focused instead on Noah, who was now whimpering his discomfort, growing. She unstrapped him from the carrier and settled him on her lap, whispering to him and stroking his soft cheek. The boarding process continued, the first-class cabin filled with the quiet rustle of expensive fabrics and the low murmur of polite conversation. Tiffany moved among them, a queen in her small kingdom, offering pre-departure drinks and warm nuts. She pointedly ignored seat 2A. Another flight attendant, a younger woman named Brenda with kind eyes, noticed the omission. "Did you get the passenger in 2A?" Brenda asked quietly at the galley. "She's busy with her baby." Tiffany clipped, not looking up from her manifest. "She can wait. I don't want to disturb her." The excuse was paper-thin, and Brenda knew it. Tiffany's prejudices were an open secret among the crew. She was famously deferential to the white, wealthy passengers, and dismissive of anyone she deemed out of place. Brenda sighed and grabbed a bottle of water. She walked over to Chloe's seat. "Hi there," Brenda said with a genuine smile. "I'm Brenda. Can I get you something to drink? Some water, maybe some juice." She cooed at Noah. "And who is this handsome little man?" "This is Noah," Chloe replied, her face breaking into a grateful smile. The simple act of kindness felt like a balm. "And I would love some water, thank you, Brenda. It's very kind of you." "Of course," Brenda said, handing her the bottle. "He is just precious. Let us know if you need anything at all. Anything to make the flight easier for you both." As Brenda walked away, Tiffany watched from the galley, her eyes narrowed. She felt her authority had been undermined. She saw Brenda's kindness not as good customer service, but as a betrayal of an unspoken code, a lowering of standards. The flight hadn't even left the ground, and a storm was already gathering within Tiffany, its target squarely fixed on the unsuspecting mother in seat 2A. She smoothed down her uniform, the fabric straining against the rigid set of her shoulders. The cabin door was about to close, and her stage was set. The ascent was smooth. The powerful engines of the Airbus A380 lifted the mammoth aircraft into the blue expanse with a gentle, sustained push. Below, the sprawling geometry of New York City shrank into a map of itself before disappearing beneath a blanket of pristine white clouds. For a while there was peace. Noah, lulled by the white noise of the engines and the rhythmic vibration of the plane, had finally drifted off to sleep in Chloe's arms. Chloe leaned her head back against the soft leather, closing her eyes and savoring the quiet moment. She felt the familiar knot of travel anxiety begin to loosen. The calm lasted for approximately 45 minutes. It was broken by the insistent ding of the seatbelt sign, switching off, signaling that the crew could begin their in-flight service. Tiffany Brewster clipped her trolley into place at the front of the first-class cabin and began her slow, deliberate procession. Her movements were sharp, her smile a brittle veneer that didn't reach her eyes. She served the tech CEO, the elderly couple in row 1, the film producer. With each interaction, her voice was a study in practiced deference. When she reached row 2, she stopped. Her gaze fell upon the diaper bag at Chloe's feet. It was a high-end designer bag, but to Tiffany it was just clutter. "Mum," she began, her tone clipped and devoid of any warmth. I need you to stow that bag in the overhead compartment. It cannot be on the floor during service. Chloe opened her eyes, startled from her light doze. Noah stirred in her arms but remained asleep. "Oh, I'm sorry," she whispered, conscious of her sleeping son. "I need to have it close by. It has all of his things, diapers, bottles, wipes. The flight attendant who helped me earlier said it would be fine here as long as it was under the seat in front of me. The floor must be clear." Tiffany repeated her voice, louder this time, cutting through the cabin's quiet hum. "It's a safety hazard. Put it in the overhead bin. Now." The word "now" hung in the air, a sharp, unnecessary command. A few passengers glanced over, their curiosity piqued. Chloe took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. "I understand. But if he wakes up and needs something, I can't be getting up and down and disturbing everyone to get into the overhead bin. Surely you can understand that. It's tucked completely out of the way." "The rules are the rules." Tiffany snapped, her patience, already tissue-thin where Chloe was concerned, completely evaporating. "The rules don't make exceptions for people who can't control their children." The insinuation was ugly and clear. It wasn't about the bag anymore. Chloe's skin prickled. The calm she had so carefully cultivated was fracturing. "Excuse me, what is that supposed to mean?" "It means that this is a first-class cabin," Tiffany said, her voice rising in pitch and volume. She was no longer just speaking to Chloe. She was performing for the other passengers, casting herself as the guardian of order against this interloper. "People pay a lot of money for a peaceful, comfortable experience. They don't pay to listen to a crying baby or to navigate a nursery you've set up in the aisle." Noah, disturbed by the sharp, angry voice so close to him, began to cry. It started as a soft whimper and quickly escalated into a full-blown, distressed wail. "Now look what you've done," Chloe said, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger and frustration as she tried to soothe her crying son. "What I've done," Tiffany scoffed, placing her hands on her hips. "I'm trying to do my job. You're the one who can't keep your baby quiet. Perhaps you and your baggage would be more comfortable in coach." The word baggage was aimed not at the designer bag on the floor, but at the mother and child. It was a dehumanizing, racist barb, and it landed with the force of a physical blow. The air in the cabin grew thick and heavy. Passengers were now openly staring, their champagne flutes paused mid-air. "That is completely out of line," Chloe said, her voice low and firm, even as she bounced a screaming Noah on her knee. "I want your name, and I want to speak to your supervisor." This was the ultimate transgression in Tiffany's eyes, to be challenged, to have her authority questioned by this woman. All the resentment, all the petty prejudices she had harbored for years, coalesced into a single point of white-hot rage. "My name is Tiffany Brewster, senior flight attendant," she announced, her voice ringing with misplaced pride. "And I am the supervisor in this cabin. There's no one else for you to complain to. You are disrupting this flight. You are a problem." "You are the problem, Tiffany," Chloe shot back, her patience finally snapping. "You are unprofessional. You are rude, and you are clearly discriminating against me." "Discriminating?" Tiffany let out a short, incredulous laugh that was pure acid. "Oh, please, don't play that card. You people are always so quick to cry racism when you don't get your way. You think because you scrounged up enough money for one fancy ticket that the rules don't apply to you. That's not how it works." The cabin was silent, save for Noah's terrified screams. Every eye was on the two women. Brenda, the other flight attendant, rushed forward from the galley, her face pale. "Tiffany, stop. Let's just calm down." But Tiffany was beyond reason. She felt cornered, and in her warped reality, victimized. She saw Chloe's defiant face, the crying black baby. And it was all a challenge to her world, to her authority, to her sense of order. You need to learn some respect. Tiffany seethed her face inches from Chloe's, and then she did the unthinkable. As Chloe shifted the wailing Noah to her other shoulder, trying to create space, Tiffany's hand shot out. It wasn't a push, it wasn't a shove, it was a slap, a sharp, stinging crack that echoed through the stunned silence of the cabin. Her hand connected with Chloe's cheek, the force of it snapping Chloe's head to the side. For a split second, the world stopped. The only sound was Noah's crying, which had hitched into gasps of pure terror. Chloe's hand flew to her cheek, not just from the pain, but from the sheer stunning shock of the assault. A bright red handprint began to bloom on her dark skin. She had been slapped, while holding her baby, on a commercial flight, in first class. The absurdity and the violence of it were breathtaking. A collective gasp went through the cabin. The tech CEO in 3D shot to his feet. "Hey, what the hell are you doing?" Brenda stared in horror, her hands flying to her mouth. "Oh my God, Tiffany!" Tiffany herself seemed shocked by her own actions. Her hand dropped to her side, and a flicker of fear of realization finally broke through the haze of her rage. But it was too late. The line had not just been crossed, it had been obliterated. Chloe, however, did not scream. She did not cry. After the initial shock, a preternatural calm descended upon her. She slowly, deliberately turned her head back to face Tiffany. The fire in her eyes was gone, replaced by something far more terrifying ice. She continued to soothe Noah, her movements, steady her voice, a low, calming hum that was only for him. She looked at Tiffany, the woman who had just assaulted her, and her expression was one of pity mixed with a steely, unbreakable resolve. She held Tiffany's gaze for a long, silent moment. Then, with her free hand, she reached into a diaper bag, the very bag that had started the entire conflict, and pulled out her phone. She didn't say another word to Tiffany. She didn't need to. The quiet clicks of her fingers on the screen were louder than any shout. The storm had broken, but the true devastation was only just beginning to be calculated. The atmosphere in the first-class cabin was thick with a toxic cocktail of shock outrage and dawning horror. Tiffany Brewster stood frozen, the angry red on Chloe's cheek, a visceral testament to her catastrophic loss of control. The passengers who had been passive observers were now an active, murmuring jury. Phones previously hidden had discreetly emerged, their small black lenses silently recording the aftermath. The tech CEO, still on his feet, had his phone pointed directly at Tiffany. "You're done," he said, his voice laced with contempt. "You assaulted her. We all saw it." Brenda, the junior flight attendant, finally found her voice and her training. "Tiffany, go to the galley. Right now," she commanded, her tone leaving no room for argument. She then turned to Chloe, her face a mask of profound apology. "Mum, I am so sorry. Are you okay? Is the baby okay?" Chloe barely seemed to register her. Her focus was entirely on her phone. She was still gently rocking Noah, who, exhausted by his own terror, had subsided into hiccuping sobs against her shoulder. Her fingers moved across the screen with purpose, typing a short, simple text message. "To Jax, an incident has occurred on flight SA-22. A flight attendant assaulted me. Please handle it." She hit send. Tiffany, prodded by Brenda towards the galley, watched Chloe with a mixture of fear and lingering, defiant arrogance. Who is she texting her lawyer? She thought wildly. She can't prove anything. It was a chaotic moment. I'll say she got in my face that I felt threatened. The self-serving justifications were already forming a desperate attempt to rewrite the irreversible act she had just committed. A few minutes later, Chloe's phone buzzed. It was a call, not a text. The name on the screen read, Jax. She answered, putting it on speakerphone, her voice remaining impossibly steady. "Chloe, are you all right? Is Noah all right? Talk to me." Jackson Sterling's voice filled the small space around her seat. It was a voice accustomed to command, deep and resonant, but now it was tight with barely suppressed fury. "We're shaken, but we're physically okay," Chloe said calmly. "A senior flight attendant named Tiffany Brewster just slapped me across the face while I was holding Noah." There was a dead silence on the other end of the line. When Jackson spoke again, the calm veneer was gone, replaced by a chillingly quiet lethality. "Give me the flight number again." "Sovereign Airlines flight, SAU 282, New York to Los Angeles." "I see it," he said. The sound of rapid typing could be heard. "Stay calm, I am handling it. Do not speak to the flight attendant again. Do not speak to anyone until the captain comes to you. Do you understand?" "I understand," Chloe replied. "I love you." He said the words, a raw, protective growl. "I love you too," she whispered, and ended the call. In the galley, Tiffany was trying to regain her composure, whispering furiously to Brenda. "She's making it all up. She was aggressive. She threatened me." Brenda just stared at her. "Tiffany, she was holding a baby. There are 20 witnesses. Multiple people are recording. What is wrong with you?" Before Tiffany could answer, the intercabin phone buzzed with a sharp, insistent summons. It was the call from the cockpit, a call a flight attendant never wants to get mid-flight. Brenda answered it, her hand trembling. "Galley Brenda speaking." She listened, her eyes widening. "Yes, Captain. Yes, I understand. Right away." She hung up the phone and looked at Tiffany, her expression grim. "The captain wants to see you. In the cockpit. Now." This was a serious breach of protocol. The cockpit was sacred ground during a flight. For a captain to summon a flight attendant for a disciplinary issue mid-air was almost unheard of. A wave of genuine fear finally washed over Tiffany. This was spiraling far beyond a customer complaint. She walked the length of the plane on unsteady legs, past the curtain, into the business class section, and up to the reinforced cockpit door. She knocked. The door opened, and she was pulled inside by the first officer. Captain Frank Miller was a veteran pilot with 30 years of experience. He was unflappable, a man who had handled engine failures over the Atlantic and emergency landings in snowstorms. But the face he turned to Tiffany was one he reserved for dire emergencies. It was pale and taut with anger. "What in God's name did you do, Tiffany?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. "Captain, the passenger was unruly. She was a safety risk." "Shut up," Miller commanded, cutting her off. "Just shut up. I just got off the satellite phone with the CEO of Sovereign Airlines, David Morrison. He was patched through on an emergency line by our operations center. And do you know who David Morrison had just gotten off the phone with?" Tiffany shook her head, her throat suddenly dry. "He was on the phone with Mr. Jackson Sterling," Captain Miller said, enunciating each syllable as if it were a death sentence. The name meant nothing to Tiffany. It was just a name. "Who?" The captain stared at her, as if she were the dumbest person on the planet. "Jackson Sterling, the man who owns Sterling Aviation Group, the man who owns this airline, the man who owns this $60 million airplane, the man who signs every single one of our paychecks, and the woman you just assaulted. The woman in seat 2A. That is Chloe Sterling. His wife, the baby you terrified, that's his son." The world tilted on its axis. The hum of the engines, the sterile smell of the cockpit, the blinking lights on the console. It all faded into a dizzying, nauseating blur. Tiffany gripped a console for support, her knuckles turning white. It couldn't be. It was impossible. The woman in 2A, so unassuming, so ordinary. She wasn't some flashy celebrity. She was just a black woman with a baby. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying speed. The quiet confidence, the lack of histrionics after the slap, the calm, purposeful phone call. She hadn't been calling a lawyer. She had been calling the owner of the entire damn airline. "Oh my God," Tiffany whispered the words catching in her throat. "Yes," Captain Miller hissed. "Oh my God is right. We have been instructed to divert. We are not going to LA. We are landing at the nearest suitable airport, Chicago O'Hare. The authorities will be meeting our flight. You will be removed from my aircraft and taken into police custody. You are relieved of your duties effective immediately. Your career with this airline, and likely any airline, is over. Now sit down there and do not say another word." He pointed to a small jump seat in the back of the cockpit. Tiffany stumbled towards it, her legs refusing to hold her. The frosty authority, the years of self-important pride, all of it shattered into a million pieces. She was no longer Tiffany Brewster Sr., flight attendant and queen of the first-class cabin. She was just a woman who had slapped a billionaire's wife in front of 20 witnesses at 35,000 feet and who was about to fly directly into the center of a hurricane she had created herself. Down in the cabin, the captain's voice came over the PA system, calm and professional, but with an undercurrent of steel. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Due to an unforeseen security incident on board, we will be diverting our flight and landing in Chicago. We apologize for the inconvenience and will provide more information once we are on the ground." Chloe Sterling heard the announcement. She gently stroked Noah's back, pulled a soft blanket over him, and looked out the window at the endless sea of clouds. A single tear, not of pain or anger, but of sheer weary sorrow, traced a path down her cheek, right next to the fading red mark of Tiffany's hand. The landing in Chicago would not be the end of the story. It was merely the beginning of the consequences. The descent into Chicago was tense and silent. The first-class passengers, now fully aware of the gravity of the situation, exchanged uneasy glances. The story had spread in hushed whispers through the curtain to business class and beyond. The woman who was slapped wasn't just any passenger. The entire plane was being diverted because of what had happened to her. All eyes were on Chloe, who remained a portrait of stoicism, tending to her son as if nothing else mattered. Her calm was more unsettling to the onlookers than any outburst would have been. Tiffany remained sequestered in the cockpit, her world having shrunk to the confines of a small jump seat and the crushing weight of her own stupidity. She could hear the clipped professional exchanges between the pilots and air traffic control as they were given priority clearance to land. Every word was a nail in her coffin. As the plane taxied towards a remote stand away from the main terminals, the flashing blue and red lights of police cars and airport authority vehicles became visible on the tarmac. This was not a discreet gate arrival. This was a full-blown incident response. The moment the engine spooled down and the seatbelt sign pinged off, Captain Miller's voice came over the PA again, this time addressed only to the first-class cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated. The authorities will be boarding the aircraft to deal with a specific matter. We appreciate your cooperation." The main cabin door opened, not to a jet bridge, but to a set of rolling stairs. Two uniformed Chicago Police Department officers boarded their faces, stern and impassive. They were followed by a man in a tailored suit who radiated an aura of quiet, formidable power. Captain Miller met them at the door. "Captain Miller," the man in the suit asked. "Yes, sir." I'm Daniel Chen, head of corporate security for Sterling Aviation Group. And this, he said, gesturing to a sharp-looking woman beside him, is Ms. Albright from our legal team. He hadn't flown to Chicago. He was already there. Jackson Sterling's network was vast and immediate. He had people everywhere. Captain Miller nodded grimly. The crew member in question is secured in the cockpit. The passenger, Mrs. Sterling, is in seat 2A. Daniel Chen's eyes swept the cabin and found Chloe. He gave a slight respectful bow of his head, a gesture of deference that did not go unnoticed by the other passengers. He then turned to the police officers. Officers, the flight attendant is Tiffany Brewster. The victim is Mrs. Chloe Sterling. There are multiple witnesses and video evidence of the assault. One of the officers approached Chloe's seat. "Ma'am, I'm Officer Kowski. Are you willing to make a statement about what happened?" Before Chloe could answer, Ms. Albright, the lawyer, stepped forward. "My client will be making a full statement, officer, but we'd prefer to do so in a more private setting. We have a lounge prepared for her inside the terminal." She then addressed Chloe directly, her voice softening. "Mrs. Sterling, my name is Catherine Albright. Mr. Sterling sent us. We're here to take care of everything. Let's get you and your son off this plane." As Chloe gathered her things, a team of Sovereign Airlines ground staff, led by the Chicago station manager, boarded the plane. They swarmed the first-class cabin, their faces etched with anxiety and apology. "Mrs. Sterling," the station manager began, his voice trembling slightly. "On behalf of Sovereign Airlines, I am profoundly, deeply sorry for what you have experienced. It is an inexcusable failure of our duty of care." Chloe simply nodded, allowing Catherine Albright to guide her towards the door. As they descended the stairs, a black Cadillac Escalade was waiting on the tarmac, its engine humming. This was the kind of ground service reserved for heads of state. Meanwhile, back on the plane, the two police officers were escorted to the cockpit. They emerged moments later with Tiffany Brewster between them. The transformation was shocking. The haughty, imperious flight attendant was gone. In her place was a pale, terrified woman in a rumpled uniform. Her severe chignon had come loose strands of blonde hair, framing a face slick with tears. As she was led through the first-class cabin, she saw the faces of the passengers, the tech CEO, the elderly couple all staring at her with cold contempt. Her eyes met Chloe's for a fleeting second, as Chloe was about to step into the waiting SUV. There was no triumph in Chloe's expression, only a vast, weary disappointment. And then, just as Tiffany reached the top of the stairs, another black Escalade, identical to the first, pulled up on the tarmac. The back door opened, and Jackson Sterling stepped out. If Chloe was the picture of understated elegance, Jackson was the embodiment of raw power held in check. He was tall and athletic, dressed in a bespoke suit that probably cost more than Tiffany's car. But it wasn't his clothes or his powerful build that commanded attention. It was his eyes. They were fixed on the scene with an intensity that felt like a physical force. He ignored the police, the plane, and the airport officials. He walked directly to the first Escalade, opened the door, and enveloped Chloe and Noah in his arms. He kissed his son's head, then his wife's forehead, his entire posture a shield of fierce protection. He murmured something to her, his back to the unfolding drama. Only then did he turn. His gaze swept past the police officers and landed squarely on Tiffany Brewster. He didn't say a word. He just looked at her. In that single silent glance, Tiffany saw the full, terrifying scope of her mistake. This was not just a powerful man. This was a man whose entire world she had threatened, whose wife and child she had harmed. She saw no anger in his eyes, no rage. She saw something far worse, the cold, dispassionate promise of complete and utter ruin. He was looking at her not as a person, but as a problem to be erased. Tiffany was placed in the back of a squad car. The tech CEO from seat 3D, along with 2 other passengers, willingly gave their contact information to Daniel Chen, offering to serve as witnesses. The entire process was brutally efficient. Inside the quiet, leather-scented interior of the Escalade, Jackson held Chloe's hand. The red mark on her cheek was still visible, a stark reminder that drove a stake of cold fury through his heart. "The best trauma doctors are meeting us at the hotel," he said, his voice low. "For you and Noah, just to make sure." "I'm okay, Jax. Really," she whispered. "It was just, the shock of it." "No," he said, his voice hard as granite. "It was not just anything. It was an assault. It was a hate crime, and it will be treated as such." He pulled out his phone and made another call. "David," he said, his voice dangerously soft. "Yes, I'm with her. She's fine. No, we are not fine. I want a full press release drafted. No corporate euphemisms. I want it to state that a Sovereign Airlines employee committed an unprovoked, racially motivated assault on a passenger and her infant child. I want it to state that the employee has been terminated and is in police custody, and I want that release to go out in 1 hour. I don't care what the PR team says. Do it, and get the board on a video call for 8 a.m. We have a lot to discuss." He hung up. The car sped away from the airfield, leaving the Sovereign Airlines plane, sitting isolated on the tarmac, a multi-million-dollar monument to one woman's prejudice. The initial karma had been swift and devastating, but Jackson Sterling was just getting started. This wasn't just about getting Tiffany fired. It was about making an example of her. It was about scorching the earth, so nothing like this could ever grow in his company again. The sun had not yet risen over Los Angeles when the board members of Sterling Aviation Group began logging into the emergency video conference. Their faces appearing in small boxes on the screen were a gallery of concern and confusion. They were titans of industry, used to dealing with billion-dollar mergers and fleet acquisitions, not middle-of-the-night security incidents. They knew something was wrong. They had all seen the alerts lighting up their phones, but the details were still scant. At precisely 8 a.m., Pacific time, Jackson Sterling's face appeared in the main window. He was not in his usual office with its panoramic view of the city. He was in a hotel suite in Chicago, the background muted and impersonal. His expression was grim, his eyes holding a cold fire that made even the most seasoned board members sit up straighter. "Good morning," he began, forgoing any pleasantries. "As you are all now aware, yesterday afternoon, on flight SA-212, one of our senior flight attendants, Tiffany Brewster, physically assaulted a passenger, my wife, Chloe Sterling. She struck her across the face while my wife was holding our 10-month-old son, Noah." A collective audible intake of breath went through the virtual boardroom. They knew Jackson was fiercely private. For him to bring his family into this context meant the situation was beyond critical. David Morrison, the CEO, spoke first, his face ashen. "Jax, on behalf of the entire company, I am horrified. We have already issued the press release as you instructed. The employee has been terminated, and we are cooperating fully with the Chicago PD. Cooperation is the bare minimum, David." Jackson stated, his voice flat and dangerous. "This is not a PR problem to be managed. This is a cancer inside our company that I was not aware of, and for that I blame myself. But now that I am aware, we are going to cut it out with a blowtorch." He continued, laying out his directives with the precision of a military commander. "First, our legal team is not to cooperate. They are to assist the district attorney's office in every possible way to ensure Ms. Brewster is prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. I want assault charges, child endangerment charges, and I want our team to push for a federal hate crime investigation. I want her to face a jury." A few board members shifted uncomfortably. This was aggressive. Usually a company would try to distance itself from a rogue employee's criminal case. Second, Jackson went on, ignoring their discomfort. "We will be filing a civil suit on behalf of the company against Tiffany Brewster for damages to our brand and reputation. Every penny we win from that suit will be donated to a charity of Chloe's choice that fights racial injustice." He paused. "We will not be settling. We will take it to trial. I want her financial ruin to be a matter of public record. Third, I am commissioning an immediate top-to-bottom independent audit of our company's hiring practices, training protocols, and internal complaint systems, specifically regarding racial bias. The results will be made public, no matter how ugly they are. And based on those results, we will implement a new mandatory zero-tolerance anti-racism training program for every single employee, from the baggage handlers to this entire board, myself included. Attendance will not be optional." He looked at each of their faces on the screen. "And finally, every single passenger in that first-class cabin is to have their flight fully refunded. Furthermore, they are to be credited with 1 million frequent flyer miles and issued a formal personal letter of apology signed by me. The witnesses who have stepped forward to help will receive free first-class flights for life. We will reward those who did the right thing." The scope and severity of the response left the room silent. This was not damage control. This was a declaration of war. "Any questions?" Jackson asked into the silence. There were none. "Good. Get it done." He ended the call, leaving the board members to scramble into action. Meanwhile, in a sterile Chicago police precinct, Tiffany Brewster was experiencing the other side of Jackson's wrath. After a sleepless night in a holding cell, she was now sitting in an interrogation room. Her request for a union representative had been met, but the man sitting beside her looked defeated before they even began. He had already seen the videos that were beginning to circulate online, shot by the passengers. He knew this was a losing battle. A detective and a woman in a sharp suit entered the room. The woman introduced herself. "Ms. Brewster, my name is Assistant District Attorney Miller. I'm here to inform you that my office is pressing charges against you for misdemeanor battery and child endangerment." Tiffany's head snapped up. "Child endangerment? I never touched the baby. You committed a violent act against his mother while she was holding him, causing a situation that put him at risk of physical and emotional harm. It stands," the ADA said coldly. "Furthermore, given the language you used, which was documented by multiple witnesses, we are petitioning the Department of Justice to investigate this as a federal hate crime." The union rep put his head in his hands. Tiffany felt the floor drop out from beneath her. Hate crime? No. It wasn't about race. She was just unruly. You called her "you people" and told her she didn't belong in first class. The detective read from his notes. "Sounds pretty specific to me." He closed the notebook. "Sovereign Airlines has also informed us that they will be pursuing a civil lawsuit against you. Their lawyers are already filing the paperwork." Tiffany stared at them, her mind reeling. Fired. Arrested. Criminal charges. A federal investigation. A lawsuit from a multi-billion-dollar corporation. This wasn't happening. It was a nightmare. Just yesterday she was serving champagne and looking down her nose at the world. Now her world was being systematically dismantled, piece by piece, by a force she couldn't even comprehend. "I need a lawyer," she whispered, the fight finally draining out of her. "Yes, you do." The ADA agreed, a grim satisfaction in her eyes. You're going to need a very, very good one. Back at the hotel, Chloe was watching the news. The story was the national headline. Flight attendant fired arrested after in-flight assault. The chyron read, a picture of Tiffany, a smiling corporate headshot, was next to a picture of Chloe, a candid paparazzi photo from a charity event last year. They showed a short, grainy clip of the incident, stopping just before the slap. Then, they cut to the Sovereign Airline's press release, quoting it in full. An unprovoked, racially motivated assault, an inexcusable act that is in complete opposition to the values we hold. Jackson walked into the room and turned the TV off. Don't watch that. They're calling her a monster, Chloe said quietly. A racist. She is, Jackson stated simply. I know, Chloe said, looking down at Noah sleeping peacefully in a crib the hotel had provided. But it feels huge. It feels like we've dropped a bomb on her life. Jackson sat beside her and took her hand. She armed the bomb, Chloe. She built it, carried it onto the plane, and she detonated it herself when she put her hands on you. All we're doing is making sure the fallout lands exactly where it's supposed to. His phone buzzed. It was a message from Daniel Chen, his head of security. Ms. Brewster's social media has been identified. It's not pretty. The internet has found her. Jackson knew what that meant. The corporate and legal hammer was only one part of the equation. The second and perhaps more brutal wave of karma was about to hit. The court of public opinion was now in session, and it was about to deliver a verdict far swifter and more merciless than any judge. In the 21st century, public shaming is a digital wildfire. It requires no judge or jury, only a spark of outrage and the oxygen of social media. For Tiffany Brewster, the inferno began with a single tweet from the tech CEO, in seat 3D Robert Peterson. He had over 2 million followers. At 9 p.m., the night of the incident, he posted, "On a Sovereign Air flight today, witnessed a flight attendant, Tiffany Brewster, verbally abuse, then physically assault a black woman holding her baby. All because of a diaper bag. The worst display of racism and unprofessionalism I have ever seen. Kudos to Sovereign for diverting the plane and having her arrested. Some things can't be tolerated." He attached a 30-second video he had filmed. It was crystal clear. It captured Tiffany's sneering face as she said, "You people are always so quick to cry racism," followed by the sickening crack of the slap and the collective gasp of the cabin. The tweet exploded. Within an hour, it had been retweeted over 100,000 times. Tiffany the attendant. Now Sovereign slap and flying while black were trending worldwide. The video was ripped and reposted on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. It was everywhere. Every click, every share, every comment was another shovelful of dirt on the grave of Tiffany's reputation. Amateur internet sleuths, fueled by righteous indignation, got to work. It took them less than 30 minutes to find Tiffany Brewster's Facebook and Instagram profiles. Her privacy settings were laughably lax. They found photos of her on luxurious holidays, always in her uniform with captions boasting about the perks of her job and the elite people she met. But they also found a darker side. They unearthed old posts containing thinly veiled racist jokes. They found her liking xenophobic pages and sharing politically charged memes that denigrated minorities. They discovered comments where she complained about the ghettoification of certain neighborhoods. A full ugly mosaic of her prejudice was assembled and put on public display. Screenshots were taken before she had a chance to delete anything, creating an indelible record of her bigotry. The comments on her photos turned from fawning friends to a tidal wave of digital venom. Racist trash. Hope you enjoy the unemployment line. Imagine thinking your flight attendant job makes you better than anyone. You assaulted a mother. A mother! The uniform doesn't give you class, Tiffany. It just makes you a racist with a trolley. I'm a flight attendant for another airline, and you are a disgrace to our profession. We don't claim you. Her personal information, a fireable sin in the world of doxing, was inevitably leaked. Her address, her phone number, her email. Pizza restaurants in her suburban New Jersey neighborhood received dozens of prank orders to be delivered to her house. Her phone buzzed incessantly with blocked numbers callers who would either scream at her or just breathe menacingly into the receiver. When she was finally released on bail, a sum paid by her bewildered and ashamed parents, she returned home to find a news van parked across the street. Her front lawn had been egged. Someone had spray-painted the word racist on her driveway in giant black letters. She stumbled inside, locked the door, and collapsed. The corporate and legal assault orchestrated by Jackson Sterling was a structured, methodical demolition. This was something else entirely. This was chaotic, relentless, and deeply personal. It was the howl of a million strangers, all screaming her name in disgust. She tried to fight back. In a moment of sheer desperation and delusion, she gave a short-lived interview to a tabloid journalist who had been hounding her, offering her money for her side of the story. "It's all a misunderstanding," she said, her face puffy from crying. The interview was conducted on her porch, the spray-painted driveway visible in the background. I was the victim. She was aggressive. I felt threatened. It had nothing to do with race. They are a powerful family, and they are using their money to destroy me. I'm the real victim here. It was a catastrophic mistake. The interview aired, and the backlash intensified tenfold. The internet dissected her words, her body language, her transparently false claims of victimhood. The "I felt threatened" defense. Classic Karen move. One popular commentator posted on YouTube in a video that garnered 5 million views. She slapped a woman holding a baby, and now she's the victim. The audacity is breathtaking. Chloe and Jackson's names had, by this point, been leaked by media outlets. The world now knew the full story. Chloe Sterling, wife of billionaire Jackson Sterling, owner of Sovereign Airlines. Instead of diminishing sympathy for Chloe, as Tiffany might have hoped, it amplified the narrative. It became a story of poetic justice, of a bully who picked on the wrong person and got her ultimate comeuppance. The David and Goliath story was turned on its head. The seemingly powerful Goliath, Tiffany, in her uniform and position of authority, had tried to crush a seemingly vulnerable David, Chloe, a lone mother with a baby, only to discover that David's husband owned the entire battlefield. Companies Tiffany had ever tagged or praised on her social media rushed to distance themselves from her. A hotel chain whose loyalty program she had boasted about issued a statement confirming her membership had been revoked. The local yoga studio she attended posted an Instagram story clarifying that the values of our community do not align with hatred or violence. She was being systematically excommunicated from her own life. Her friends went silent, afraid of being tainted by association. Her parents begged her to stop talking, to disappear, but she had nowhere to go. She was trapped in her house, a prisoner of her own infamy. The hard karma was not a single event. It was a suffocating, all-encompassing reality. Being fired was just a job. Being sued was about money. This public evisceration was about her identity, her very place in the world. She had built her self-worth on a fragile foundation of perceived superiority. Now that foundation had been pulverized, and she was in a free fall with no bottom in sight. She had slapped a woman, and in return, the entire world was slapping her back. 6 months passed. The digital firestorm eventually calmed, as all such storms do, moving on to new targets and fresh outrages. But the landscape it left behind in Tiffany Brewster's life was permanently scarred. Her name was now synonymous with a certain kind of viral racist meltdown. She was a human meme, a cautionary tale. Her legal battles concluded not with a dramatic courtroom showdown, but with a series of quiet, crushing defeats. Faced with overwhelming evidence, the video, the testimony of a dozen credible witnesses, her own disastrous public statements, her lawyer advised her to plead no contest to the misdemeanor assault and child endangerment charges. The hate crime investigation, while not resulting in a federal charge, was cited by the judge during sentencing as an aggravating factor. She avoided jail time, but her sentence was a different kind of prison. She was given 2 years of probation, a permanent restraining order to stay 500 feet away from the Sterling family, a mandatory 200 hours of community service at a social justice center, and court-ordered anger management and racial sensitivity counseling. The civil suit from Sovereign Airlines was even more devastating. As Jackson had promised, the company did not settle. They took her to court. Her defense was non-existent. The judge awarded the company a judgment of $500,000 for reputational damages. Tiffany, of course, did not have that kind of money. The judgment meant a lien would be placed on any property she owned, and her future wages would be garnished for decades to come. It was a debt that would follow her for the rest of her life. As pledged, Sovereign Airlines immediately announced that every cent collected would be transferred to the Noah Sterling Foundation for Child Advocacy, a new charity Chloe had established with the initial seed money from the airline. Tiffany sold her house to pay her legal fees. She moved back in with her aging parents, a 40-year-old woman, humbled and broken. The prideful, authoritative, senior flight attendant was gone forever. She tried to find work, but her name was toxic. A Google search was a digital tombstone. She eventually found a job taking inventory on the night shift at a massive impersonal warehouse on the outskirts of town, a place where no one knew her name and no one cared. Her days of looking down on people were over. Now she spent her nights in anonymity, counting boxes, the silence of the warehouse, a constant reminder of the life she had so carelessly destroyed. For Chloe and Jackson, the incident became a catalyst. It had been a traumatic, ugly affair, but they were determined to forge something positive from it. Chloe poured her energy into the new foundation, which focused on providing legal aid and support for minority parents who faced discrimination. She became a reluctant but powerful public voice on the issue, her quiet grace and strength resonating with millions. She never spoke of Tiffany with malice, but rather used the experience as an example of the insidious everyday prejudice that so many people face without the resources to fight back. What happened on that plane was not unique, she said in an interview with a major news network. The racism, the sense of entitlement, the abuse of power that happens every day. The outcome was unique. My husband and I had the privilege and the power to ensure there were immediate and severe consequences. But most people don't have that. Our goal with the foundation is to lend our privilege to those who have none, to ensure that no mother ever has to feel as alone and as violated as I did in that moment, and to make sure that bullies learn that their actions will have repercussions whether there's a billionaire in the background or not. Jackson, for his part, implemented the sweeping changes he had promised at Sterling Aviation Group. The independent audit revealed uncomfortable truths about unconscious bias in their hiring and promotion tracks, which led to a complete overhaul of their HR department. The mandatory anti-racism training became a new industry standard, eventually adopted by several other airlines. Sovereign Airlines, once the site of a PR catastrophe, was now lauded as a model for corporate responsibility and proactive change. Their profits, after a brief dip, soared higher than ever as they gained a reputation for safety, luxury, and integrity. One afternoon, about a year after the incident, Chloe was in her home office reviewing a grant proposal for the foundation. Jackson walked in, holding Noah, who was now a bubbly toddler just learning to walk. He came over to her desk and showed her his phone. It was a news article. The Brewster Judgment first garnished wages donated to charity. The article detailed the first payment collected from Tiffany Brewster's warehouse job. It was for $287. 15 laws. That money had been transferred directly to the Noah Sterling Foundation. Chloe looked at the small sum. It was insignificant in the grand scheme of the foundation's multi-million-dollar endowment, but it was profoundly meaningful. It was the first tangible fruit of a hard lesson learned. It was justice, accountability, and a chance at redemption, all wrapped up in one small transaction. She looked at her son, laughing and reaching for the phone, blissfully unaware of the storm he had been at the center of. She looked at her husband, whose fierce love had turned a moment of violation into a movement of change. The slap had left a mark not just on her skin, but on their lives. It had been a test of their values, and they had not been found wanting. They had taken an act of personal racialized hatred and transformed it into a legacy of public good. The karma that had hit Tiffany Brewster so hard had not been an act of revenge, but the rebalancing of a scale, an act that had created a ripple of positive change that would extend far beyond one airplane, one flight attendant, and one family. And there you have it, a story that started with an ugly racist comment and ended with a complete life-altering reckoning. It shows that sometimes the universe has a funny way of delivering karma, and sometimes that karma comes in the form of a quiet, unassuming mother whose husband just happens to own the entire airline. Tiffany Brewster's story is a powerful real-world reminder that our actions have consequences, and that prejudice and cruelty, no matter how casually they are delivered, can bring about a downfall of epic proportions. What do you think? Was the karma too harsh, or was it exactly what she deserved? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, and you want to see more incredible tales of justice and dramatic revenge, make sure you hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to see it, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. Thanks for watching,